it would be nice if sports worked together, particularly in the women's space, to really try and help sort of elevate each other. And it's that classic saying, is like a rising tide helps all boats.
That was the voice of Corey Cutrupi, the guest on this episode of The Knowledge Mill. I'm your host, Greg Yoakum. Corey Cutrupi is a part-time educator, part-time exercise scientist, researcher, and full-time sport enthusiast. Currently, his research has taken him on a quest to better understand how organizations can effectively leverage major events in women's football to create sustainable growth in Australian women's football. The centerpiece of this study was the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023, hosted in Australia and New Zealand. While it was no secret how the bandwagon of women's football was full as a result of this event, Corey is on the pursuit to identify what strategies are most effective in making sure that the bandwagon remains at capacity. Previously, Corey has worked at Tennis Australia, Football New South Wales, and has had various roles in health and sport following a sport and exercise science degree. Today, he teaches in the undergraduate and postgraduate sport management streams in the UTS Business School as he looks to conclude his PhD. Still finding time to work in the corporate health space, Corey enjoys the balance of combining his passions into a dynamic working week. Ultimately, sport is Corey's biggest passion, and when he isn't playing sport, likely due to his knack for an injury, he is living and breathing it as an educator, spectator, and behind the scenes. Corey and I first met each other in 2019 when I was coordinating one of the subjects he took as part of his master's course at UTS. At the time, I was at the same stage of my PhD that he is now at in his own PhD. Life goes around in funny circles this way. Corey and I have no difficulties talking about sport and the lives we both lead around it, but this time we decided to turn on the microphones. While we did manage to keep the focus on Corey's PhD, we also unpacked a number of critical issues in the sport world, i.e., the things that keep us both engaged in this field of research and teaching. This episode of The Knowledge Mill was recorded in my office at UTS on November 21st, 2025. Show notes, including links to more information on some of the topics that Corey and I discuss, can be found at theknowledgemill.com/episode 25. That's episode in the numerals 2 and 5. Hello, Corey. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming.
It has. It's been a while. It's your people talking to my people, and vice versa. And
That's right.
We've got there.
Negotiating between our agents, and finally we worked out all the details. The contracts are signed.
It's good, mate. No, I'm glad to be here. The lounge is comfy. So.
Yeah, that's right. And you are the first guest to what listeners will not appreciate is just how comfortable you are right now.
It is.
You're the first guest on the couch.
I feel relaxed. It's it is a very good couch.
It's not bad, hey.
Yep.
Yes, I'm jealous actually because I'm just in my desk chair, but
we can swap halfway through. Right?
Yeah, there we go. And if I sound more relaxed later, they'll know that's when that happened. You and I have known each other for a while actually. So going back to I believe it was 2019 I taught a post-grad sports subject for Nico that I can't remember the name of now.
I believe that would be probably because the name has changed
that many times. Yeah. But yeah, what you and I have reflected on in the past about that opportunity. I was doing my PhD at the time. I was in the final year, and I was covering that as part of Nico Shulenkov's PEP sabbatical for non-UTS people. And that was a good opportunity for me at the time to take on post-grad teaching, but what made it an even better opportunity was just the value of that cohort, which has never been recreated in. I've had very good cohorts, but that's the gold medal cohort.
Yeah, it was a cool time. It was maybe a Wednesday night from 6 till 9, sort of seminar style, and yeah, we'll dive into it later, but I think part of that sort of seeing where you were at in your point in your academic career and was very inspirational, probably not just to myself, but quite a few in the cohort. But I think the very, I wouldn't say heated debates, but very passionate debates that we had around different concepts within the subject. Yeah. It was a really cool dynamic where we had a range of perspectives from students, not just domestically, but internationally, from their backgrounds, particularly in sport. And I think it just made for, I would still say, and obviously not just because I'm on your podcast, but it was easily my favorite class that I did.
Oh, nice one. Yep. Well, it's definitely my favorite that I've taught.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's not to put down any of the other ones I've taught. It's just that one was just that much fun.
Yep.
For want of a better, more academic and professional word.
It was.
As you said, the international students, there was a nice blend of international students who were passionate about sport in their idiosyncratic ways. So like they brought the stories from their home countries. They had worked in sport, a lot of them, the domestic and the international students. It was just a really nice cross section. And as well, everyone always turned up. It was maybe 40 students, and we always had 36, 37 in the room who were willing to participate. And it was lightning in a bottle. I've never been able to, I didn't create it that time. I just lucked into being along for the ride. But that was pretty magical. It's interesting because now you're at sort of the point in your PhD that I was at in my PhD at that time. But yeah, let's get into that side of things. So how did you? I know your story, but for the benefit of the listener, the reason that we're here, how did you get from that point A to this point B?
It's a weird one. It's a longish one. I guess benefits of a podcast. I can elaborate on it, but basically at the time of doing my postgrad course in sports management at UTS, I spent a little bit of time in and around Tennis New South Wales and Tennis Australia. So I was working on the operations side there and was really enjoying that, and sort of saw myself completing my master's, which was due to finish mid-2020, so a year and a half program, and then move into a full-time role in that space. So at that point in time, there was honestly no intention to look at a PhD at that point. I'd never even considered it. And then we moved into that summer, and then went overseas for a few months ahead of my final semester, did some networking, and everything was lining up pretty nicely. And then the whole world decided to turn upside down in 2020. We don't need to dive into the reasons being, but I'm sure we're all very familiar.
Most of us were there, yeah.
Most of us there. And so that kind of threw a spanner in the works in terms of career prospects in the space I was in at that time. No fault of the organization, but unfortunately sport took a big impact, as did other areas. But there was no job opportunities in the near future, and I think it made me really question what was going to be a viable career with the uncertainty that was around. So had a bit of a full 180 and dived back into what I maybe was inspired to do as a kid, and that was maybe looking in the police side of things, and the federal police really caught my eye. So I actually applied to be a federal cop.
All right.
And that was an 8-month process. And so whilst I was finishing up my master's, I was going through that. Physicals, psychological assessments, very intensive. And if you ever consider doing that, just be prepared for that. But we got through it. Early 2021-ish, we got to that space and got the email that I got accepted. And I was like, that's really cool. And at the time, whilst I was waiting for all that, I was actually tutoring at the sports science school at UTS, and doing exercise prescription and delivery in a really good subject coordinated up there, and using my exercise sports science background as an undergrad. And so I was enjoying that. And basically 3 days after I got the email accepted by the federal police, I tore my ACL playing football. So so that was one of those things, a bit of a shock to the system, and it really rattles you. And so obviously with the physical demands involved in what it would take for a 12-month sort of development program, there's a lot of physical stuff involved. So I notified them, and they said, look, until you sort your knee out, you're of no use to us, which is fair enough, to be completely honest. I was no use to a lot of people at that time. And so once that happened, it was kind of a conversation that lined up with one of the subject coordinators, or two of them, both Sharon Coots and Kelly Ellis, that ran the show back then up there. And they asked me, had I ever thought about doing a PhD? And so that was the initial sort of seed that was planted in my head. And that's when the ball started to drop around what I would do it in. And I sort of went away from it, not thinking much, but over the coming days started to think, oh, if I ever did it, what space would I like to be in? And that's when I started to reflect on my time here and seeing how you were going about things in your tenure, and then also had a good relationship with Nico Schulenkorf as well, who was looking after you at the time. And then sort of reached out to him, and we had a Zoom conversation, as obviously you couldn't be in person around that time. And he just gave me a little bit of insight around what would be involved, and if I could think of a good topic, write a research proposal, and then come back to him, and if he likes it, he'll put it to the uni and roll from there. So cut a long story short, that's what I did. Sat and thought for a while around what I'd do and took it back to him. He liked it, the uni liked it, and then here I am, I think we're there 4 years later, nearly 5 years, or I don't know where we're at now. It's 4 years later.
Yeah, right.
So
that's a very similar story actually to mine. I also just kind of reached out blindly to Nico. I was maybe a little further back on the curve than you were, because I was sort of reaching out to see what doing a PhD would look like. So I didn't really have like what you might call a specific ambition to do one. But then maybe it happened with you too. He talked me into it really quickly.
He's a very convincing man. So,
yes.
He instills a lot of confidence within. And, So, yeah.
The nice thing about Nico too, and I can only get away with saying something that sounds like I'm pumping myself up, because I'm actually saying it to pump you up. Yeah. It's just by extension, it's also me. Is that, Nico, if he sees the value, then the value is there. Like he's got a good nose for a project that's feasible and achievable, and for a person who can get it done.
Yeah, for sure. He's not wasting his time, so it is nice when he's on board with something. Yeah, it does instill that confidence, because he knows what he's looking for.
Yeah, that's right. That kept me going when you get the harder pieces of feedback. There's like this is a love language.
Yep, it is. It's tough love.
He wouldn't tell me this if he didn't think I could do better.
Yeah, exactly. He sees it in me.
That's right. That's right. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the nuts and bolts, the nature of your doctoral project?
Yeah. So when it sort of came time to put it together, there was a few things, and obviously it would be in the sporting space, that I'd had, I guess, a dabble in within my early career, spending some time in women's football, in the junior levels, working more performance analysis, and as I moved to more the business management side, started to think about where it was heading. And obviously, as many of us know, whether you are in the sporting space or even just casual to sport, the women's sphere in sport is an emerging space and continues to have a lot of momentum. So my passion is football, and I sort of looked on the sporting calendar what was coming up. And so at this point it was 2021, and seeing the 2023 World Cup, which was going to be hosted in Australia and New Zealand. And I really saw that as an opportunity to really do something and maybe have some sort of impact. As a droplet in an ocean, really, that impact. But I thought it was a really cool space and an area that I was passionate about. And having grown up around a lot of older female cousins, I used to go and watch them play football. When I wasn't playing football, obviously I was, but on the Sundays I'd go watch them play and just sort of loved watching them. And so that was an inspiration in itself. And so at the same time, I saw a concept of a boom cycle, which is presented by an author called McLaughlin. And this particular sort of article talked about women's sport for years or decades and decades has gone through a similar cycle where we hit this peak of excitement and it gets a little bit of a following, but we sort of just take the foot off the pedal and we sort of sit there and go, all right, well, we've done enough, we've done our bit, and all that momentum that we sort of built just falls away.
Yeah.
And so it was like, how do we break that cycle? How do we actually use one of these major events to really change the narrative and change that pattern and break the pattern? And so that sort of putting those two ideas together, right, we've got a big event coming up. How do we leverage it to make sure that football continues on an upward trend in this country, particularly in the women's space? And so sort of fusing that together, the overarching title of the thesis was around leveraging major events in women's football to create sustainable fan engagement in Australia. And so that's sort of how my thesis was born, and we built from there.
Yeah, nice one. And how have you gone with everything? What have you're a fair ways through the PhD now, but can you speak about some of your findings to some extent?
Yeah, so it's felt like an eternity, but we're plodding along. I call it the home stretch. For those that have been in it, probably know it's not your typical home stretch. It's more of a marathon on top of more marathons. But we've recently submitted paper 1 to a journal.
Mm-hmm.
So waiting to hear back from that. We'll level expectations there. We'll see how we go. And so that paper was around the use of social media in leveraging these events. So we looked at a few different organizations, whether it was media or football in Australia, and how they executed their social media strategies before, during, and after the World Cup. And so is there an ideal strategy, whether it's utilizing creative, interactive, informative types of content, and then in addition to that, the types of, I guess, the tones they were using as well, which was an interesting space. But just the timing of the actual posts and the actual activity, the amount of activity, what we noticed was there was a few that were a bit late to the party, so they were very quiet before the tournament, and it was a very reactive sort of, oh, hang on, there's
a World Cup.
Yeah, there's a World Cup. Like, what's going on? People are actually getting excited. We better jump on this bandwagon. And that's kind of proves the point around the boom cycle is like everyone jumps on the wagon, and then it's also after it's like, okay, are you going to keep trying to ride this and try and steer it into the next direction, which obviously we have the Women's Asian Cup coming up early next year. And so are we building a bridge to that and trying to see the link between that and the next and give people something to go back to? Obviously, we have the domestic game here. Was football at all levels steering people back into other areas of the game to keep them engaged and make sure the sport's still benefiting? Or is it just like, right, hands in their pockets, everyone goes back to where they were before until something interesting pops up again in their mind? So you got to give people a reason to stick around. And so social media is such a big part of most people's world. I'm going to say everyone. And so how it's utilized, obviously there's some negatives to it, but how it's utilized for the positives and to the advantage as a strategy by these organizations was a really interesting space that I thought was worth diving into. So that's the essence of the first paper.
Yeah, excellent. And that's it. As you were talking me through that, I'm wondering, were you just looking at official channels like Football Australia and maybe the governing bodies of the other competing countries, or were you looking at brands, fans, players? What was the scope?
So we kept it close to home. So there was 3 football organisations based here, one of them being Football Australia. Then we had the Matildas, and then we had the other one. Gosh, I feel like I've almost erased it from my memory just to move on to the next thing. But we had the A-Leagues. Mm-hmm. So, and that was sort of that next level down. So there was no direct association or affiliation with the World Cup or the national team. But when you've got players feeding into that space, it makes sense. And so how do they leverage that?
Yeah.
And then in the media space, we looked at Optus Sport, we looked at ABC, and now just backtracking, Optus Sport being the paid streaming broadcaster. ABC Sport was there as a neutral broadcaster where they didn't really have skin in the game for financial reasons. But okay, what was a neutral broadcaster doing to promote women's sport if they're a sports sort of entity? And then likewise, we had Channel 7, who was the free-to-air broadcaster. So just understanding how they all viewed the event and how they used it was really interesting. Some of the dynamics and I guess who went hard at it, and at what point. And then, I guess sort of a quick overview, or one of the findings was just post-event, the media obviously are looking to the next thing rather than just what's in football, particularly someone like a Channel 7 goes, right, well, we've done our bit, and the drop-off's quite quick. So that was interesting. So yeah, kept it close to home. I think the resourcing wise to try and look at every country, I think that'd be a really interesting case, and potentially something for the Asian Cup where it's a smaller pot of countries to look at. But there's definitely something there, and I think there was a little bit of reference back to the Women's Euros and when it was hosted in England and the success they had off the back of that. And I think that drew a little bit of inspiration from that around how that country has really elevated women's football and really got behind it. It's not perfect. It's still got a long way to go, but I think they would be the front runners in really trying to elevate women's football and keep it to a higher standard that the rest of the world could potentially aspire to.
Yeah. Well, they keep breaking attendance records over there with some of their matches, and because for Australia leads the way in some ways. You would know, of course, that the 2020 T20 World Cup was in Australia, and the second biggest crowd ever for a women's sporting match was at the MCG for that final, Australia and India. It was almost 90,000. The only number one was the final of the 99 Women's World Cup in the U.S. But now that's been broken by these football matches in Europe. It's been really fascinating. I think just same time frame as going back to when you and I met in 2019. Just in that 5 or 6 years, attendance records being broken left, right, and center in different sports and codes. And I think there was a little bit of the Matildas are, for anyone listening who's not a sports fan, they're the women's national team. And they enjoyed some, unprecedented success in the tournament because they got to the semifinal, which was unexpected, but welcome for the home team to get that far and give the punters something to follow and get excited about. And they've continued to attract big crowds, haven't they, for some of their friendly matches domestically? And
yeah, they went on a bit of a run of sellouts, or completely selling out the stadium, which was really exciting. I think that was a really cool thing to see, and it just was a testament to the growth of the game. But that semi-final against England, we won't talk about the result, but it was a really cool point where I think it helps when the host nation achieves success and potentially, I think, outside looking in overachieves. I think internally the squad believed they could go a long way and would have endeavoured to win the whole thing, so they would have been disappointed. But from the outside looking in to get to the semi-finals of a World Cup is a fantastic achievement. And I think, speaking broadly, just any World Cup really, when you have your host nation going a decent distance in the tournament, it does help with engagement and excitement. So that was really cool. I think that also that whole space around the build up to that World Cup, everyone in football kind of knew it was coming, but I think everyone outside of it just was like, whatever, until, again, like we mentioned before, it landed on our doorstep. And to your point before around the T20 World Cup, again, that big major event that happened in 2020, I think was, obviously there's a lot of other unfortunate things that impacted, but when we're talking about the sporting context and women's sport, it really put a halt to the momentum that I think cricket was building in women's, and you're well informed around that space, obviously, and from what you noticed. But it was an incredible event that it was such a shame that everything just basically stopped within a week or two after it. Yeah,
1 week. 1 week after lockdowns.
Yeah.
So that was all because I went down for that final.
Yeah.
And so it was just the strangest thing that you're in the second biggest crowd for any women's sporting event ever, almost 90,000 people, and then the next week it's illegal to be out of your house.
Yeah, which is
really hard to wrap your head around.
I mean, for those, if we keep this in the archive, those that are listening in 15, 20 years will start to think this is a fictitious podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
If we're talking about things like that. But,
what movie are they recapping here?
Exactly. So, it's a fascinating space, and things like that, unfortunately, halt momentum.
Yeah, that's right. And we see that because, well, there's two things there, because to your point about the success of the home team, Australia were actually, in some ways, lucky to get into that final because they didn't win their division, and then the semi-final that they had to win to get to the final almost got rained out, and then South Africa, the higher seed, would have gone through by default, and so Australia may not have even played in that final. And I know that the ticket sales, I don't have exact numbers here, but they were somewhere around 55 to 60,000. And then when Australia made it, they got the last 25,000. So it would have been a very different story had the home team not been there. Yeah. And then, of course, they went on to win, which ended up being a huge, iconic moment.
Yeah.
And then 1 week later, go into pandemic lockdowns. And then you have the ODI World Cup, Women's World Cup in Bangladesh. And it seems like, one step forward, two steps back in terms of the venues may or may not have been available for certain matches. There were a lot of stories about fans speaking about leveraging these kind of events, right? Fans that were coming from Australia or even further away in England that just couldn't even make reservations for accommodation or even flights because they didn't know what city their team was going to be playing in. And this was weeks out from the tournament. That should have been booked in months before. So just, you have all this momentum, as you said, and sure, a pandemic, that's one thing. But then if you can't harness that and carry the momentum forward, some of it's luck. You got to get the home team into the final to get that extra 25,000 to come along. But the other is, you got to have a stadium like the MCG that can hold that crowd of 86,000. That when they had the women's Ashes test at the MCG earlier in the year, I mentioned to you before we started recording that I was down there for that, and that set a record for women's test matches. But the sub-headline to all of that is there aren't that many women's test matches, so there's not a lot of supply. And then also when they're played, they tend to be played in smaller stadiums and during the middle of the week. So the schedule doesn't favor crowds coming out, whereas that one was played after the Australian Open had finished in Melbourne, and then was a day-night test. So even if you missed the first part of the day, you could come after work or after the kids got off school, come in. Tickets are $20, and I think they got the total attendance across it didn't get to the fourth day because Australia annihilated them, so it only took 3 days. But it was, I think, from memory, 36,000 or something across the 3 days.
Yeah, so. It kind of leans into a point around something which is interesting, and it's a bit of a problem in this country, is how sports compete against each other, and for the biggest share of the pie. And it's a good and bad thing. We're spoiled for choice when it comes to sport in this country, but it seems a bit obscure, but it would be nice if sports worked together, particularly in the women's space, to really try and help sort of elevate each other. And it's that classic saying, is like a rising tide helps all boats. Yeah, it is a little bit of that, I think. And to your point around putting test matches on closer to other sporting events, giving people opportunities when they schedule it, I think that's really important as well. And even just being able to be adaptable and flexible. I know a lot of codes weren't happy with the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, being here during the middle of the footy season. Yeah, but ultimately it just elevates the sporting status of the country when you can do something like that. And the demand for the first match, obviously it was initially at Allianz. Credit to the organisers to go, you know what, we can put this at a core and fill it out. And they did. And it was a sellout. And all 3 matches that Australia played at a core I got to. And ironically, I actually did my ACL for the second time when before the Matildas semi-final. Still got there. But maybe need to move away from women's football for a little bit, because as soon as I've associated with it, all these injuries. But so it is interesting, and I think just coming back to the point around just being adaptable and collaborative, I think it would be the word as well. Yeah, not just within the sport, but across all sports. Yeah, is the way of the future potentially.
It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. It's there might be competition, I suppose, between, say, the AFL men's and the NRL men's who run their seasons concurrently. But I think even at that, you'd be, if you were a Sydney Roosters supporter and a Sydney Swans supporter, most times you'd be able to go to both games if you wanted to. They're not scheduled on at the same time, which would be a nightmare if they were right next door. Yeah. But yeah, it's very rare that happens. And so it doesn't have to, as you said, it's a sporting nation, and it seems to be an insatiable sporting nation. The only thing preventing us from watching more sport is that there's not more days of the week and more weeks in the year in which to watch it. We're probably reaching, our mutual friend Hunter Fujak at Deakin could speak in more detail about this. We're probably reaching something like a saturation point with all the domestic competitions. But women's, the thing that I've always said about women's cricket is that it's a fundamentally different product to men's cricket. Yep. If you like cricket, you can like men's cricket and women's cricket, or you could like one or the other. They don't have to compete. They're different things. If they were up on a shelf, it's not different flavors of the same thing. It's 2 different things. It's apples and oranges, not different flavored potato chips.
Yeah, 100%.
I sort of stretched that analogy pretty far, but you take my point. And it's not that one is better or worse. It's just which one do you like? Yep. And then you're watching. If you only focus, for example, on women's cricket, as I tend to do, I follow the men's cricket, but I watch women's cricket much more. Yep. I don't pay attention to how fast anyone is bowling or how far away the boundaries are. I'm watching world-class athletes compete, and that is the thing compelling me to tune in. It's not about comparing. And I think once you go down that road of comparing, you're kind of acting in bad faith in some ways. I'm starting to speak to a different point. This is about to become a different podcast. But.
Yeah, no, I think you raise a good point around being able to follow any sport really, if you find the right reasons to as well. And that's the biggest thing for me is it's not just about if it's males, females playing. There's certain sports that I generally wouldn't watch, but I think it's the patriotism in me. If Australia's playing, I don't care what it is. Yeah. Especially if we're playing England, which we're at the moment in the Ashes, which is just kicked off, and it's that's going to consume a lot of my sports watching time. But I think ultimately it's if you can find a reason to get behind it, it doesn't really matter who is playing and what they're playing. It's the excitement you can get from it, and I think people need to understand that they, like you said, they are different things. We're doing ourselves a disservice by trying to compare the two. Just appreciate them for what they are. And if you go in with that sort of removal of expectations, I think you'll actually have a much better time. And suddenly you've got more opportunity to enjoy sport. People are complaining, there's nothing on. It's like, well, actually.
Yeah, there's heaps.
Yeah.
There's almost, that's almost all you can watch on live television these days is sport.
Yeah.
It's one of the only television products that you have to watch in the moment. Like as soon as it's over, it's almost useless. Unless you can somehow avoid spoilers and watch a replay.
Look, I'm a big stickler for live sport. If I need to watch it and it's big enough, I'll get up at any sort of hour because it just feels different. Even if you don't know the result and you're watching a replay, I feel like I already know what's going to happen, or it just doesn't feel the same. So,
yeah, that's right. Or you start thinking to yourself, like, I'm getting upset about something that's done.
Yeah, exactly.
I can just Google right now what happened.
Exactly. I could save myself the hour, hour and a half, and get on with my day. But I refuse, and I sit here. So it's a bit of a spiral sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. And that was always me with my American sports, and really the only one that I can time shift is baseball because their streaming service does quite a good job of you can turn off all spoilers, and if I don't look at social media, I can just get up and watch the replay, and I can pretend that it's live. But there is something lost there, and you don't. If you happen to have a bunch of friends who are fans of the same team, you can't talk to any of them while you're watching. You lose the social element, and it's a different experience. But again, we're starting to get into a different podcast.
It's exciting.
That's why it's dangerous talking to someone who I know so well and that we have so much in common in terms of our research interests. We can cut this into chapters.
We might have to. I mean, I think the computer was going to run out of power before we finish running out of things to say.
That's right. But yeah, so I've thought about you at different points whenever I've seen some of these things happening because you and I were teaching in the same subject this semester, international sport management with Nico. So just everything just goes around in the same circles in many ways.
It almost sounds like we just serve Nico at this point.
That's right.
We've got to have him on.
I don't know if I want him to be listening to this episode at this point. Maybe he'll. Well, we've only said good things. We love you, Nico. If you're listening,
we do.
But yeah, it's talking about the Cricket World Cup example in Bangladesh, and it's just such a shame because you can't recapture it. And something like that World Cup final, you can't put it in a bottle. And there was so much of that same momentum around coming back to the women's FIFA World Cup. Around the excitement with the Matildas and everything else. And I'm not a big football fan, so this is where I can ask you, did they pull it off? Because we're a couple years clear of the World Cup now. Have they been able to keep the momentum going with football off the back of that event and the Matilda success?
I think the first answer for a lot of people would just be yes. And I think there was a lot of success out of it. I think the biggest thing that I continue to drive home in a lot of, not just what I'm finding, but also what I'm writing up, seems to be, did they maximize the potential? And for me, that answer is no. Because I think, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just opportunities that are missed that need to be learned from. So then we don't make the same mistake next time. And so that way everyone gets a slice of the pie, or, you know, every dollar that can be invested into the sport is invested into the sport. And so then that dollar gets turned over, and whether it's invested into player development, whether it's invested into the broadcasting side to create a better experience, whatever it goes into, it's only for the benefit of the game. And so I think, yeah, the short answer would be yes. And I think there was a lot of excitement, and I think it changed a lot around, you know, the TVs at the pub on the main screen was women's football. And there's people going out in the middle of winter collectively down at Tumbalong Park for, you know, watch parties, and down at local football grounds and within the community. And look, that did vary from probably association to association and club to club on how well they leveraged it, how much they gave opportunities for, you know, all members of, and players and coaches to come down and have a watch night down at the park on a screen to watch the game. Some clubs did that amazingly, and other clubs, that was really lost on them. And so I think it's that education piece around probably the stubborn individuals in the sport that are very much like, no, this is how the sport is, and supposedly only men play the sport. It's like, well, no, get with the times, or get out of the lane, because, you know, it's a shared space. And I think it was really exciting, and it really transcended not just football in this country, but just sport in this country. Like, we started talking about it up there with Kathy Freeman and, you know, that John Aloisi penalty in 2005. But the way it captured, again, not just women's football, but just sport, I think it started to tilt the needle towards women's and men's football, or not just women's and men's football, but women's and men's sport can be talked about in the same space and have the same level of excitement. And so, yes, whilst they're different things, they both deserve the same amount of respect. And I think we saw how epic it can be. Yeah. It just needs to be, there and served in front of people, as men's sport has always been. And that's the difference, right? Is people go, well, no one wants to watch it. It's like, well, no one's putting it out there yet. There's not enough of it. And there's been studies or surveys done where an overwhelming majority of people said, yes, if it was broadcasted, I'd watch it. But it hasn't been in recent years. Now, in the most recent years, yes, we've seen a bit more, but, you know, it only took 7-8 years ago, and there was, I think, maybe even 5 years ago, 5% of sports broadcasts were women's sport. Like 5%. That's nothing. And so if your TV's on 50% of the time, you're very likely to miss that 5% as well. That's the other problem too, right?
The scheduling,
So, and the society we live in now, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, we move on very quickly. And so our attention span is short. So if you're not putting it in front of the consumer, how likely are they to go out and look for it? Like, I guess, and people may have different opinions around that, but I think it's important, and there's a responsibility from broadcasters to really invest in women's football as well, because I think that validates to the casual. Oh, right, actually, they're putting money behind this. I'll watch it. And you and I know that this is absolutely worth investing in. But unfortunately, the casual sports fan may not be as aware, and they need it in front of them to then see it and go, wow, that was really entertaining. And it just becomes normal to watch it then.
Yeah, that's right. The case study that I love about all of this in Australia is that of the WBBL, which is the Women's Big Bash League. And it connects to what we've been talking about in a couple of different ways, because there's been interesting aspects of, I believe it's now in its 10th or 11th season.
It might be 11th.
Time is weird, so I lose track.
Yeah.
I know I keep getting older. And so other things do too. But the interesting thing about the WBBL is they started the Men's Big Bash League. This is the domestic T20 cricket competition here in Australia. They started the men's league, and the plan was always to bring the women's league in after the men's league got off the ground. And so it was always part of the plan. It wasn't reactionary. It was set up in a very structured, tiered way. And then the women did come along in, I believe, the fourth season of the men's competition was the first season of the women's competition. That's the other reason I get the numbers confused, is because each season is WBBL 10 or whatever, but then the men's has a different number, and as I get older, I can't keep track of these things. But when the women did come in, at that time, they had a lot of doubleheader matches with the men's matches. The seasons ran concurrently, and it allowed for that then. But again, this was an intentional move on the part of the governing body, which was Cricket Australia, acting as Big Bash League, separate CEO, but still same organization. And that was very good in a lot of ways. But there were interesting situations where I'm a Sixers fan. Elise Perry, probably my favorite athlete of all time. Love watching her play, love watching her do work. And I would want to go along to all of those matches. These were in the glory pre-child days when I could just do whatever I wanted at any time. And I would try to go to all the matches. But if it was a men's doubleheader, it was free to go and watch them at Drummoyne Oval or Hurstville Oval. If I wanted to go watch it as part of a men's doubleheader, now I had to buy a ticket to a men's match that I didn't want to watch to watch the women. But I wasn't the target then. I was already a fan of the women's, and what they were trying to get is the people who were coming for the men's match. But I didn't like the wording of the advertising at the time, which was come early and support the women. Which suggests that this is not part of what you're buying a ticket for. This is this extra bonus. Come early. You're here for this other thing. So if you come for this thing, you've come early.
Yeah, like an opening act at a music gig or something. Yeah, it's just like, thanks for supporting. Which is, that's the language around it, right?
Yeah.
And it starts from the organizations, and it starts from, again, broadcasting and setting that up. I think for this particular season, the one thing I like, and it's in and out, but I think more sports need to do it, even just for the men's side of sport, to be honest, is using and utilizing smaller facilities, whether it's more community grounds and things like that. So having standalone matches at Drummoyne Oval, standalone matches at North Sydney Oval, it's closer to people. Yeah. And I think full stop, there's probably, again, a few sports, whether it is rugby league, that should be doing more of that too, rather than using an 80,000 seat stadium to sit 9,000 people.
Yeah.
Again, another conversation. But I really like that. And for me, even to go and watch the men's Big Bash at the SCG, that's a bit of a commute if I'm at home, which I'm kind of in the NOS. So any match at Drummoyne Oval, men or women, I'm going to go watch. Yeah. So that's been really exciting for me. I'm trying to get down to as many as I can this season that are going to be played at Drummoyne Oval, particularly for the Sydney Thunder. That's not to clash heads with you, but that is my team.
I think that's happening. If it wasn't this week, it's next week. The Sixers and the Thunder at Drummoyne.
Yeah, because they had the first Sydney Smash last Saturday.
Oh, okay. Then I missed it.
But I think the next one will be. They'll obviously play two. You'd be crazy not to have a Sydney derby twice. But and I think that's been a really good move. And they're filling it out, which is really cool. And making it accessible. And again, it comes back to that point about make it available and accessible for people.
Yeah.
And people will probably come.
Yeah, that's right. And that's, I said this at the time when I was doing my PhD, and I was working with the Sixers, which was a happy coincidence. Then going to the matches was suddenly work. Now I had even more reason to to go along. The game day experience wasn't strictly part of what I was doing in my PhD, but I call it work. And I would, at that time they were playing a lot of matches at Hurstville Oval, and it was still free to get in. They weren't even charging admission for these standalone matches. And I just said, what an unbelievable opportunity that if you live in Hurstville, you walk 2 blocks down the road, you just walk through the open door. You don't even line up to get a ticket. Through the open door, park on the hill, Elise Perry, Ash Gardner, Alyssa Healy, and whoever they're playing. That's just the Sixers.
Yeah.
All the big guns playing. And incredible.
Superstars.
Incredible. And now even, you pay $15 or something to get in. So it's still tremendous value. In fact, their fan experience surveys said that people thought $15 was too little. I would agree with that for the caliber of cricketers you're watching. But yeah, there's an economics angle to it, right?
Yeah.
But it goes back to that thing you were saying before, and this is my favorite thing to debate with students in these subjects that we teach. Women's cricket is not new. This didn't just appear out of thin air, and we had Elise Perry and others, Meg Lanning at that time, and other players. It goes back to Belinda Clark and the other greats back in the day, and the history is over 100 years of representative national women's teams in cricket. And so the question becomes, if the women's team has been around as long as the men's team, but the women's team doesn't get as much attention as the men's team, why is that? And it comes down to how have you resourced it? Yep. How have you supported it as a governing body? I think for a long time, women's cricket was governed separately to men's cricket. It wasn't under one umbrella. And so that's where maybe bringing it all under one governing body has finally started moving things in a more positive direction. But, something I like to do with my students is to invite them to engage in time travel. Think to yourself, if you could go back to day one and you resourced both of these sports equally in terms of the money that you put into paying the players so they don't have to have jobs, and then they're also professional athletes on the side of their day job, the facilities that they get to use for strength and conditioning, the support staff with the coaches and the trainers, etc., even just the conditions in which they travel, the airfare, business class, first class, coach, these kind of things, the accommodation on the other side, everything is equal. What would the landscape look like today? And I think it would be hard to say that it would look the same.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There'd be such a stark difference because, again, to your point, the resources, the investment in it, things need time.
Yeah.
And it hasn't had that time yet.
Yeah.
And you would argue the other side of the sport for males, you go back 50 years, was the sport where it was now? No. People have advanced in the size of the game, the way it's played, because it had time and it had the investment. And so people need to understand it needs the same thing on this side of it.
Yeah.
And it kind of, to again, sort of promote my own research, but leaning into the second paper, I sort of look more at the alignment between organizations. And so I interviewed people from a lot of different levels within football in Australia. And there's some research in the past, again, kind of inspired me to look at, and some of it was based around the Women's World Cup. And to leverage an event, you need everyone to be sort of rowing in the same direction.
Mm.
And that doesn't happen a lot with, I guess, not just football, but this was a prominent example where everyone has different agendas. And if you're all trying to work towards your own agenda, there's not a lot of pie left for everyone. I keep using pie. I don't know. Maybe I should get that for dinner tonight. I keep using that as an analogy. But
I am getting weirdly hungry.
Yeah, it is. It's getting to that time. But it is a really important thing to consider is everyone needs to be aligned in terms of their strategies to work towards the same thing. And I think that comes back to that point around maximizing the potential of something.
Mm.
If you all work towards the same goal, you're more likely to achieve it. And I think that's in any setting, whether it is in a workplace, whether it's in a performance environment in a team, it's something that really needs to be looked at. And so that was an area, and it's early indications from that were there was definitely some different viewpoints around who was doing what at different levels,
right,
in football in this country.
And so that immediately is a problem.
Big problem.
Within, you could call that, I guess, like a vertical alignment. You were at different levels, and even within that vertical, because you said before, why can't these sports cooperate?
Yep.
Well, now you've got different verticals cooperating, but if you have a disconnect in that same vertical, you're never gonna.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I think there's and I spoke to a lot of really good people that have women's football at the top of their list in terms of really trying to promote and push it and make sure it goes where they want it to. And I don't think it could be in better hands with a lot of those people, but unfortunately, it's just the disconnect. And again, I'm not trying to point fingers or anything, but it's just more an educational piece. I think what my research is trying to do around, hey, if we all just sort of have a moment to think about where we're trying to go and what we're actually trying to get out of it, not just at the top level. And I think that's kind of been the downfall of football to an extent, in a broader picture, is it sort of that funding model has always tried to promote the top level, whereas AFL goes the other way about it. And I think sort of that has really been a beneficial side to it. But to bring it back to football, I think it's just a really important thing to have. And like you said, that vertical alignment, everyone needs to be heading in the same direction. And I think we probably started to see a little bit of that in and around the World Cup. But again, back to that point, to maximize the opportunities.
Yeah.
That's just the educational piece where it's like, right, well, with this Women's Asian Cup coming up, what did we learn from the last major event, and how can we do it a little bit differently to make sure once the A-League season for women, even for men, but for women, once that comes around again, how do we make sure we get more bums on seats consistently? So you have a little bit of an increase in attendance. But even the last World Cup, there was a study around Major League Soccer in the US for women, and there was an initial spike after the World Cup for a couple of weeks, but then attendance numbers for domestic matches dropped to the lowest in years.
Right.
Which was really interesting. And I don't know if that's just fatigue of the product, but I think probably more a lack of linking that bridge between this major event, these are the players, and here's who you can continue to see from those players that you enjoyed watching during the tournament. And so that sort of model of leveraging has been something I've looked at too.
There's been really interesting, this is going to seem like it's coming out of left field, but I'd be interested in your take on this based on what you just said. When they had the very first Women's State of Origin, which was maybe now 4 or 5 years ago, I went along, and it was at North Sydney Oval, and it was a very romantic night that way, because here you've got like a iconic ground for rugby league, but which almost never gets rugby league these days. So North Sydney Oval for the first State of Origin, for anyone who doesn't know, is New South Wales representative team versus Queensland representative team, the two big rugby league states in Australia. And it was the first one they had for the women, and I think it even predated the NRLW, or it might have been season 1. I'm not sure.
I think it may have been season 1.
Yeah. But I think they only had the 4 clubs in season 1, so it was...
Yeah, which is hardly a competition, to be fair, because everyone made the semis.
Yeah, that's right. But when, in the lead up to that, I was still on Twitter, because Twitter was still fun at that time. It's not fun anymore, so I'm not on it. They had a graphic, and the graphic was all of the players on both teams, New South Wales and Queensland, and then a comparable male superstar to like help, I guess, the average, this person you're saying who doesn't know it's there until it's in front of them, connect the dots of like, oh, okay, Sammy Bremner is similar to, I don't know, let's say Cam Smith. But that struck me as weird at the time, that you were converting women's... It was the comparison, right? Yeah. And they weren't saying that one of these athletes was better than the other. They were trying to link playing types. Yeah. If you like Cam Smith, you'll like Sammy Bremner, etc. But I don't know. It's a little off topic, but what do you make of that? Is that the kind of linkage that needs to happen, or?
I think you can go either way. I think for people like yourself and I, where you wouldn't see it as like why would you compare the two? Like, obviously they're going to have different physical attributes, but the style of game that they play and likely the position they play, like men's and women's, regardless of the sport, they play, like there's the same positions are involved. It's the same sport. The way the product is played is different. It's the same thing in men's and women's tennis. It's different styles. And I would argue women's tennis is more enjoyable to watch because it's longer rallies rather than just 2-3 shot rallies.
Yeah, that's right.
Men, which
I agree. I find women's tennis so much more interesting.
So around that, I think if you're trying to inform and get people to understand more about the product, I don't think it really matters the way you go about it. And I think, again, in hindsight, at the time, it would have been a little bit like, oh, that's a weird way to try and introduce a player. But how else would you do it if you're coming from nothing in understanding the women's side? And most people wouldn't, because it was a relatively new competition. So it wasn't to no one's fault, but no one would understand a lot about it unless you're going to the junior levels and watching. But even that was scarce at the time. So, okay, how's the quickest way we can inform? And we still do it from male to male comparisons. It's like this new superstar coming up is the next so-and-so. And it's like, so why not do that with the female game anyway? And over time, you might start to find that we do it the other way as well. Like you look at Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
Like is she a one in a million? Is she like one and only? Who knows? But I think in time you're going to see someone come into the league and just throw, like, I would argue it's just a Steph Curry comparison. But you could also say that the next person to come in the NBA, you could say is a Caitlin Clark style player where just has an incredible range, or you can compare and say they're similar to a Caitlin Clark and Steph Curry. Like, you start to categorize them the same. So gender doesn't really need to be
just a playing type.
So no, I think it's an interesting thing you brought up. I don't know if I gave you the clearest answer, but
no, I think you did, because it came back to that point you were making before. I think that even ties into the vertical alignment, right? I think it's, who are you trying to get? If you're preaching to the choir, the people who are coming anyway, well, that's not for them, because they already know who Sammy Bribner is. Maybe they don't know who Cam Smith is. Like that's, I could name probably everyone on the women's national cricket team. I could name 5 or 6 maybe on the men's team. But anyway, you have to, I think, understand the target then. Who are you trying to capture? And then how to speak to them, I guess.
No, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing. And it needs to happen before anything starts to get rolled out. And it's that strategy and planning. And this is where it becomes really important pre-event, in the lead up, to have that time to understand, right, let's sit down. What do we want out of this? Who are we going after? Rather than that reactive sort of strategy, if it's a strategy, I guess, where it's like, oh, this is going really well, we should throw more of this out there. Because by doing that, it's great, you've acknowledged it, but by the time you get it out there, if you're reacting, you've already missed a certain amount. And I can't quantify it, but I know for a fact you haven't captured the full potential because there's a period of time where you weren't doing it. And I think that's the biggest, or one of the biggest pieces to come out of what I'm doing is, you might be doing it really well, but you could be doing it better. And it's not a, shame on you. It's just a, hey, like, I want you to do as well as possible with getting what you want out of this. So just understand that these are the strategies and the approaches that you should consider.
Absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of sport organizations get stuck, is they find something that works, or they enjoy a virtual monopoly, and they're not forced to reflect on why they're doing things the way they're doing them and what results it's getting. They are doing things, and there are results, and the results are good. And so, what, to use a colloquial phrase from where I'm from, you don't want to fix what ain't broke.
100%. Absolutely.
Right. And so it's really hard to shake an organization like that up. And
it's a fair point. It's a frustration in sports sometimes, is trying to reinvent the wheel when it's like, well, did you need to do that?
That's because it could go the other way. If you don't know why you're reinventing the wheel, are you even trying to invent a wheel? Or are you trying to invent something else? And then there's another, now I'm just trading in cliches and colloquialisms, but there's another idea that I really like, which is climb however high on the ladder you like. It won't matter if you put the ladder up against the wrong wall.
100%.
So,
I don't mind that one.
I
don't mind that. I might keep that.
That one. It's a good one. Make sure put the ladder up against the right wall first, then climb.
Leave that as a parting gift for students in week 12. It's just like, by the way.
That's right.
Some career advice. I think the PhD space itself has been really interesting in terms of just learning about the things that I enjoy from a different lens. And it's been interesting watching sport in the last, I guess, 3.5 years, when I've got a PhD on my desk, looking at how do you leverage events to create engagement. And so you just sit there watching sport, whether it's in person, whether it's at home, whether it's at the pub, and there's just this voice in the back of my head going, how could this be done differently? And I wouldn't say it's ruined my life, but it may have hampered the way I watch sport now, because I'm considering other things, it's really cool. But it's been an interesting thing. I think I'm just looking at it more from a macro view of what a PhD can do for someone or an individual. Which has been interesting, but it's been a funny way of watching sport and I guess consuming sport is with this lens of oh, what would I do if my PhD was on this?
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about it too, because there's one thing about learning too much about how the sausage is made.
Yes.
Now I've just colloquialism after colloquialism, but I've had that experience as well, specifically with American football.
Yeah.
And I've had my attention raised to issues of CTE, i.e., brain damage occurring in not just professional athletes, professional football players, but college players as well. So you're actually just watching kids get brain damage.
Yeah.
Matters of exploitation in terms of African-American athletes going on what Harry Edwards would call a conveyor belt from socioeconomically deprived neighborhoods into universities making millions of dollars off their likeness and abilities and results on the field. I don't really love name, image, likeness stuff with now that's created this weird new marketplace where it used to be, well, there were bagmen and things like this where it was meant to be amateur, but things were happening to persuade players to go to certain unis over others. And I'd be naive if I said that if I tried to pretend that my alma mater didn't participate in that. But, it's gotten very far. The whole idea in U.S. college athletics, which was always my number one love, and football was my favorite of football and men's basketball were my two favorite sports, but football was always my top one because I was in the marching band, so I was a part of the machine as well. And you start feeling a certain way about what you're seeing, and then you start learning about why those things are the way they are. Yep. And then it got to the point with me where I couldn't watch anymore. I couldn't participate. And I have a WVU football-sized hole in my heart, but I haven't watched the games. I only watch passively, sort of like as an ombudsman almost, just sort of keeping an eye on what are they doing. And it was ultimately the pandemic that broke me with it, because there were all these stories coming out of the pandemic in those early, like that first year, 2020, where we didn't have vaccines yet. We didn't even really understand what it was to get COVID-19, or how it would affect people's bodies, or what the long-term implications of repeated infections were, etc. Things that we still don't actually have answers for. Here you have a situation where you've got a black athlete coming out of, in the case of West Virginia, they have a pipeline with a lot of Miami high schools. A black athlete coming out of a socioeconomically disadvantaged neighborhood in Miami, let's say. This is a generic example, not any one real player. And why are they going to WVU? They're going to WVU before name, image, likeness came along, because they could get a scholarship and they could go to university and they could get a 4-year degree and go off, and most athletes end up having careers outside of professional sport, just because of sheer numbers. And football it has one of the lower through rates because there are so many. There's like 125 players on a D1 football team, and not all of them are going to go. Very few of them will go pro, even on the best teams. And so really you're there. The attraction is the scholarship, and you're meant to be a student athlete, student-athlete. That was meant to be your identity, and was put in that order for that reason. You're a student and also an athlete. But now it's been completely inverted. Now you're an athlete who, takes classes, if they even exist. Like if you look at the UNC example, where there were students enrolled in subjects that didn't actually exist in reality. But before I digress and go too far down this, if I decide to leave this in the podcast anyway, before I go too far down with this digression, what I'm getting at is inevitably you reach a threshold in academia and your own research where you learn too much about how much the sausage is made, but then you're also contributing to that knowledge about how the sausage is made. So now suddenly you have in the world a very unique perspective on no one else is watching sport mega events the way you are, because you're actually helping to redefine our understanding of it. And so that's kind of one of the reasons that I started this podcast, is to tap into some of those. That probably won't go in your thesis. No. The way that you're...
No, probably not. But it's been interesting in terms of even just understanding other people's and taking on other people's perspectives on the same space. I think whereas before you'd just happily give your 2 cents, I've actually found myself to be a bit more diplomatic and sit back and just listen to what other people think about the space that I would arguably be quite knowledgeable in at this point in my research, and people are making comments on it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, rather than just dismiss it, it's like, where is that perspective coming from?
Yeah.
And so you'd run it through a filter first before either, filing it or putting it in the trash can.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right. Another interesting idea I ran into recently is that all behavior, human behavior, makes sense with enough information.
Yeah.
But you have to get that information.
Yeah.
If you just jump to conclusions and make judgments.
Just dropping pockets of wisdom today, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right.
I really like that, though. It's true, though. There's a lot of validity to that. And I think doing and going through a journey like this around such a thorough piece of research and just involved in academia, I think justifies what you've said.
And that's where if you want to be, oh my God, now I'm going to quote Ted Lasso.
It is. We're talking about football.
Be curious, not judgmental.
100%.
Right? So that I don't continue to drop more quotations from things I've read and TV I've watched. We can move into the last two questions that I ask everybody. And the first is, what's on the horizon for you in terms of finishing up the PhD, maybe what you're thinking about in terms of your career, other conferences you're looking at attending, etc.?
Yeah, I think the forefront of mind would be get this thing over the line. Hopefully, early next year. That ideal target of when to finish, as scholars of the past probably know, is it keeps running away from you.
Yep.
So eventually, I'll get my hands on it, and we'll get there. But so once that's through, I think ideally remain in the space in terms of academia. I really enjoy the teaching side of things. So I think I've had a few conversations around a few different institutions. Ideally, keeping around UTS as much as possible next year to continue to teach would be amazing. And keep an eye out for that full-time role at some stage. So yeah, I think the teaching side I really, really enjoy. I think I haven't thought too much about where next with research. I think the key will be to step away from this giant project, refresh my mind, and then understand what I'm passionate about understanding next and what I want to delve into. Because I think the thought of the next piece of research makes me physically ill, to be completely honest. And it's nothing against the research side of things. I just think I just need to step back before understanding where I want to go next. And I think as long as I'm passionate about it, and I'm happy to throw my head and go head first into it. So, I think that's kind of the next 12 months is probably going to be just take on as much teaching as possible, and get this PhD over the line. Try and put a few papers out, which I've already put one, but try and push that into some different places. Went to NASM this year in San Diego. That was cool. And then I'd like to get to an ESM. That's the one I haven't been to yet. I went to more of a sports science one a couple of years back in Paris. It was a nice way to convince the missus to take a trip. When you go into Paris. But Samans I always enjoyed going to. It's such a good cohort of people that are incredibly supportive, and obviously people like yourself there. It's just a great way to catch up, particularly the timing of it at the end of the year. So I think getting to more Samans conferences, and just really finding my way in the space. Not to get too deep, but I think for a lot of my PhD journey, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I think being in this space, sort of going like, where do I actually fit in?
I'm sorry to say that doesn't really go away after the PhD.
I'm not expecting it to. So I just think it's just being authentically yourself and finding what's best for you. And that's really worked. And I've sort of finally grasped that, I think. And so I'm excited about what's next in this space. And I think, the teaching side of it, I've really enjoyed. So long-term, potentially reaching out to organizations with some consulting work, but that might be a part 2 podcast one day if it eventuates.
Where are they now?
Yeah.
The last question that I ask everybody, and you might have answered it a little bit there, is something not related to your PhD at the moment that you're excited about. Maybe further into that,
consulting space. I think the long-term thing that would be amazing would be to find a way to be part of the Brisbane 2032 Olympics, and just be within that space working on the event, just finding a way to contribute to it and be in and around it would be really cool.
Yep.
So that's kind of the longer career goal. Which organization I'm with at that point, I don't know. People go, oh, AOC, but I think there's a range of different areas that you could be in to be part of that space. Yeah. So I think that's one thing on the vision board. But yeah, the consulting within organizations, even just other sports, but looking at their attempt to grow. And now it may not just be women's sport, it might just be the sport itself is looking to how do they leverage things and grow. I think that's a really interesting space that I'd like to take my knowledge from this research and help those organizations understand this is the way to go about it. So I think that will become a lot clearer once, again, the PhD is done, just a clearer train of thought. Other than that, I won't dive into probably the personal marathon goals that I seem to be getting the itch for as I loom on to getting to 30 that I swore I'd never get. But
you swore you'd never get to 30.
No, I swore I'd never become that the running type. But, but apparently it's either smoking meats, running, or
brewing your own beer.
Yeah, something like this. One of the three you take on. So it might be the running path, but I think it's been
bird watching.
Yeah. Maybe that's once I'm 40.
Yeah,
if I do endeavor to hit all those milestones. Don't worry about that. But yeah, it's lots of cool things out there, and I think that being in this space has really realigned and given me a lot of excitement about what's next and the opportunities. I think that's the biggest thing this PhD has given me, is just a wealth of opportunities that has made me excited about what's next. So that's been really cool.
And isn't it amazing as well, especially because for you went so far along an alternate pathway toward the AFP and everything.
Yep.
And now you're here, and that wasn't the plan.
Yep.
But you sort of made decision by decision for your happiness, what made sense at the time, with a bit of a long view, the vision board, and here you are.
Yeah, I think we got there eventually, but it's amazing what happens in life and where the universe tries to steer you towards. But I just think you just take it in your stride, and whatever's next to you, as long as you're enjoying it, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've enjoyed this. Chatting to you, and this is really not much different to what you and I do on a regular basis. We just involved microphones this time.
We have, microphones and very cushiony headphones. So I appreciate it, man. And I think what you're doing with this podcast has been really awesome. Just giving a space for people with a PhD to actually share their story. I think we spoke about it before, but it's a very siloed experience at times. And I think to actually talk about it and just, shoot it out there is really cool. And I've enjoyed listening to the previous ones, and I enjoy listening to the future ones that you have. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time. It'll be interesting for you. You know Leanne, of course, Leanne Sobel, who was one of the first guests that I had on. And then in this same season that I'll release your episode in, I've got a second episode with her. So she was saying before she sat down to record that, I think we had about 2 years between recording them. She was just about to do stage 2 the first time, and then she was just right at the end awaiting her examination results the second time. And she was saying she went back and listened to the first one just to make sure she wasn't repeating herself on another one. She said, I was a completely different person then.
Yeah, it is where are they now? But I mean, her finishing up, it's one less person to annoy on level 6. But I just always told her that she would never come down and talk to people on level 5 because it's beneath her anyway. So you might cut that one out and just stitch up. But
that's her reward for making it to the end of the episode. Get stitched up.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I will leave that in there then. Hi, Leanne.
Yep. Cop that. But no, mate, it's been really nice. I've just outside of this as well, enjoying your company. So I look forward to hearing this and all the other ones coming forward. But this has actually been really fun to sort of reflect and dissect and try and solve many of life's problems.
Maybe we got a few.
Yeah, but we'll go get some pie now.